I think you definitely can't expect yourself to have conviction in everything. I think everyone selects the things in life that they care about, and ideally, those are the things that you want to have more or less conviction on. So there's conviction in who am I, like my values, like what kind of values am I going to have as a person, and just live my life on. If you're building it, like there's conviction in the values you want to build a company around. So I think in terms of being a founder, that the two areas people usually need to think about and care about is conviction in themselves as a founder, and then there's conviction in specifically like the company, the idea, like what you're going to pursue. And I think they're very related, but they're not quite the same thing.
Welcome to the Undefeated Underdogs Podcast, where I unpack and narrate stories of ambitious people who turn obstacles into opportunities. My goal for this podcast is to create a platform to narrate stories and maybe play a small, teeny tiny role in inspiring you. I intend to highlight the underdog mentality and make authentic conversations with people who play the long game, take action with their chip on their shoulder, and convert obstacles into opportunities. Buckle up, as I'll be bringing some authentic founders, VCs, and creators who've got underestimated their whole lives, and yet they beat all the odds to become insanely successful. Now, today I want to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of this podcast, acquired.com. Selling a business is as tough as building a business. As someone who went through this whole process of selling my own startup, I know the pain it takes to get through the end zone. This is where Acquire shines. Imagine this: you're a founder who's built a solid SaaS product, acquired customers, and generating consistent monthly revenue. The problem is you're not growing for whatever reason: lack of focus, lack of skill, or just plain lack of interest, and you feel stuck. What should you do? The story I'd like to hear is that you buckled down, somehow reignited the fire, get past yourself and the cliches, and start working on your business rather than just in the business. You start building an audience, move out of your comfort zone, do the sales, marketing, and in 6 months, you've tripled your revenue. Well, the reality isn't as simple as that. Situations may be different for every founder facing these crossroads. But too many times, the story ends up being one of the inaction or stagnation until the business becomes less valuable or worse, worthless. If you find yourself here or your story is likely headed down in this similar road, I offer you a third option. Consider selling your business on acquire.com. Capitalizing on the value of your time is a smart move. Acquire.com is free to list, and they've helped hundreds of founders already. Go to try.acquire.com/Sharath and see for yourself if this is the right option for you. All right. This episode is sponsored by Sunset. If you heard this podcast, you know we not only cover success stories, but also unpack the failed ones. And building a startup is hard. Most startups fail. If you're a founder winding down your business, then you need to look into Sunset. These guys handle all the legal, tax, operational burdens when shutting down, making sure founders and investors avoid penalties, reduce liabilities, and immediately move on to what's next. Their team has spent hundreds of VC-backed tech startups, sell their assets, redistribute over $100 million in funds to top-tier investors. If you're interested in learning more, visit sunsethq.com to meet with a representative from their team. And make sure to mention Undefeated Underdogs Podcast to get $2,000 off of your dissolution. Okay, enough ads. Let's get back to today's episode. My next guest made rotisserie chicken more famous than the inventor of rotisserie chicken, if you ask me. Andrew Rea is the founder of TaxWire, which automates SaaS sales tax compliance across your financial stack. Previously, he played key roles and led growth at companies like OnDeck, Party Round. I think it's called Capital now. He also built and sold an EV company that made golf carts. I want to dive into that, definitely. He accidentally started TaxWire when he was doing fractional work. So I'm kind of like in this mode of fractional gigs right now. So I want to definitely, I'm interested in that and explore more there. But what I love about Andrew is his honest, authentic take on being a founder and building startups. He's always like very true, very kind of like, transparent, the way he portrays highs as well as lows. I appreciate that from Andrew. And Andrew Rea, welcome to the show. How are you feeling, man?
Well, good, man. Thank you for having me and for the kind words. I'll try to see if I can live up to it today.
No, right off the bat, no, absolutely. I think, see, you're one of the folks, at least you're the, on deck alumni, I would say, where you speak from your heart. That's at least what I get when I read your tweets or like follow your posts on LinkedIn, Twitter, or read your posts on Substack. It's more like, here's my opinion. So, if you want to learn it, learn it.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think I appreciate that level of, transparency across. But man, where do I start? Like we have so much to talk about. I have so many questions, but I right off the bat, I want to talk about rotisserie chicken. Talk to him about it. Like how
Yeah.
how did you go viral? Why do you think?
Yeah.
Where did that inspiration came from? Who made you think about chicken when you're building startups? Like that there's so disconnect. Like talk to me about the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for some context, because I'm assuming your audience probably has no idea like what's going on here with like this tech grow and chicken.
I doubt that because the post went viral. You got featured in like big
yeah
things, and
the internet has a short memory though. So, but yeah, the context on it, to take a step back, is that so this has been like an inside joke amongst like just people that are like close to me, like off the internet, that just like generally know that I have a very like simplified diet. I'm a pretty disciplined, routine oriented person. I like fast, for instance. I don't eat dinner. I basically eat most of my calories at dinner. If I eat lunch, I eat a very small lunch, and I tend to eat like very like 80% of the time I eat like very high protein, like very minimalistic diet. So like a lot of chicken, like maybe rice sometimes. Like chicken and vegetables though is like a core staple of my diet. And if you live in really anywhere, but especially New York City, it's like not easy to get, like groceries are expensive here.
Right.
It's hard to just like I'm busy. I work a ton. I don't have time to meal prep, and so forth and so forth. And so when you're busy, don't want to cook, don't want to meal prep, but you want like a healthy source of chicken that's not going to break the bank, you don't have a ton of options. And so what I have discovered is that through Costco or Whole Foods, like these places sell rotisserie chicken. It comes cooked. It's relatively affordable. It's like probably one of the most affordable, healthy sources of protein you can get in almost any grocery store in America,
right.
and even around the world to some extent. And so it's just this like thing that is like out there that I can literally go walk a few blocks to Whole Foods right now and go buy like an entire chicken for like $8, and that's like at least 2 to 3 meals. And so it's just this thing that like I feel like is a total life hack if you're trying to save money and trying to be focused and trying to eat high protein. And so I like my friend, it's been a joke because I would be at the office and literally just buy a chicken and come slice some of it up and eat that, just the chicken, for lunch, or for dinner or whatever. And so my friends have like joked with me about this in the past, and I've long been like I guess amongst them like a missionary for why chicken is like such a great dietary option.
Right.
And then I had just had a conversation with a couple of founder friends of mine actually the night before. So I think I tweeted this on a Sunday.
Yeah.
The night before I had like seen them. They were like telling me all this complicated stuff they were doing for meal prep, and I was like, just like buy some chicken and like stop wasting your time on all this like overpriced like stuff you're spending way too much brain power on. And so I thought about that just kind of randomly the next day, and like it was it wasn't a planned tweet. I like threw it together, and like it probably took me like 20 seconds to write. Like it was just pure stream of consciousness. And then I hit send, and it's Sunday too. My thought was like maybe 1,000 people will see that tweet, mostly people that already know me and are in on the joke.
Yeah.
And then it just like went absolutely viral. I never expected that to happen. A lot of people got angry, and I enjoy making people angry probably more than I should. And so I definitely was in the back and forth of the discourse, but it's probably the most viral thing I've ever posted, and has kind of since become something of a meme. We ended up having a dinner at our offices where a bunch of people in New York Tech came and just had like literally we got like 50 chickens and just had them sprawled out there. So it's kind of become a bit of a meme the past couple months, but that is but there's really no more to the story than that, man. I live a simple life. I like chicken. It's affordable. More people should know about it.
You're kind of like a messenger, right? Like that's what I think when I replied to you and you replied back. I'm just a messenger here. But the reason I want to ask that is two things. Like people who are listening, one is see, you just have to be very true to yourself. That's my takeaway from that. The practices you do as a founder, or the ones you preach or you recommend others, you just talk about that. You don't need to create viral content sitting 2 hours, 3 hours every week, like thinking about how to go viral. That's not, I think, the wrong way. That's the wrong way to do it. Just be yourself. And number two is, I love the way you describe yourself being scrappy, right? Like, I am a scrappy founder, and I appreciate. I love scrappy founders because we kind of, we don't dwell too much. We just move fast, and the decision time we have is very less. So be true to yourself. The takeaways, at least I got from that tweet, is be true to yourself. Don't scheme viralities. Virality come to you when you just be yourself, and just be scrappy, man. Like, you don't have to overthink when you're early, at least like in the beginning days. So that's why I asked that question. But I also appreciate you kind of taking the tradition to next level. I saw you tweet about, like, inviting your friends and founder friends the next day or two. You had like 50 chickens, like you're saying. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, there was a little more planning to that piece of it, but like I said, it became a bit of a meme where people would like tweet about chicken. It ended up on TV at one point, and so New York Tech Week was a few weeks after this initial tweet had gone viral. And I was mostly just working all week, but I told my co-founder, what would be hysterical is if we just had a bunch of people over to our offices and ate chicken. And then he was like, "Oh, that would be kind of funny. You should tweet that and just see if anybody would come." And so I did. And then a bunch of people wanted to come. And then fortunately, I have some friends at Row who sponsored a lot of events that week. And so they hit me up and were like, "Hey, I'm totally down to make this happen." And so we Costco Instacarted 50 chickens to our offices, lined them all up on a table and cut them up. And I think we had like 50, 60, probably somewhere between 50 and 100 people that showed up that night and ate chicken. So it was a very minimalistic but fun evening.
I think chicken should be TaxWire's one of the benefits. Whoever joins, TaxWire should.
We will have a freezer stocked full of chicken. We promise you that. Freezer of chicken catered to the office every day. Yes. It's if you want anything else to eat, go work at Google. But if you want to eat chicken, come work at TaxWire.
And so let's, with all seriousness, and it's so funny that that's the life of founder. Like, you just live in those moments and express yourself. But I have like a ton of like important things I want to talk to you about, especially from a founder mindset standpoint. The first thing that comes to me is you talk a lot about conviction, and oftentimes what I hear, or the narrative that goes on Twitter, is that it is something that you should bond with as a founder. Like, you know that you have conviction towards some things. Is that true in your opinion, or do you think
as in like conviction in like your ideas and yourself? Because conviction can be in many different things.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's the clarity I want to like kind of bring to after this question, is like, founders should have conviction on themselves that they will make it. Like, no matter what, they'll just play the long game. That is different from conviction on the idea. Do you think
totally
is conviction as a skill? Like, is it a skill that is coachable, or like kind of you can learn that skill and adapt?
I think that's a good question. I think conviction is this word that gets thrown around, and it does mean different things to different people. I think, to me, there's conviction in different topics. Like I don't have conviction in every single thing in my life, or in every single thing in the world. Like, you've got a lot of people, like, if you asked me for my convictions on what the I don't know, like, who's going to win the Super Bowl like next year, or like pick your sporting event. The Olympics just happened, so like, I'm not following most of that stuff. I have no clue. So I think you definitely can't expect yourself to have conviction in everything. I think everyone selects the things in life that they care about, and ideally those are the things that you want to have more or less conviction on. So there's conviction in who am I, like my values, like what kind of values am I going to have as a person and just live my life on. If you're building there's conviction in the values you want to build a company around. And then there's like conviction in yourself. So I think in terms of being a founder, that the two areas people usually need to think about and care about is conviction in themselves as a founder. And then there's conviction in specifically like the company, the idea, like what you're going to pursue. And I think they're very related, but they're not quite the same thing. And I think for most people, you start with like yourself, like believing in yourself, unless like some people do start off and they actually get pulled into some idea that they're obsessed with,
Right.
and then later, and like not necessarily like having this huge desire to be a founder, and then later they kind of build up conviction around like being an entrepreneur. But I think for probably more people than not, or at least a lot of people, it's more of they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to take that risk, and then but then there's like do you have the conviction in yourself? Or you just like born with that conviction, or do you like earn it over time? And then like similar questions with the idea. Like I think we have all these like myths around just like what a generic founder is supposed to be like, and how much conviction they have in themselves, and how much convictions they have in their ideas. And so I think what you're alluding to is that most of our myths in tech just like mythologize these highly confident in themselves like entrepreneurs, like have no self-doubt. They always have the best ideas. They've never doubted that they would like not succeed. And I think there's some truth to that, because if you look around in the world, there are definitely people that have like never doubted themselves, or barely doubted themselves in their lives.
Right.
And so I'm not disputing that is not a thing that exists. What I will dispute is that like that is the only path to it. I think for myself, I did not grow up I grew up like poor by American standards, like in a poor, small, rural town, very religious community, like part of like very Rust Belt Midwestern America. My parents never went to college. I didn't come from money. I didn't grow up in success. I didn't know what a software engineer was till I was 20. I didn't know what Harvard was until I was like halfway through college. Like I didn't know what like if you had asked me what the Ivy League was at 19 years old, I would have had no clue. And so like same as I didn't come from a lot of the traditional places that many people did. And so I wasn't bred around success. I didn't like grow up like watching people win and be very financially successful in their career. And so I think when you come from that background, maybe you're an immigrant and you moved here, maybe you like just came from a poor background. I don't know, maybe your parents sucked and like you just like you just like they like you were like the unsuccessful child of like multiple siblings. I don't know. Everybody has their story, but some people I think are bred around like enough success, or for whatever reason they just see it and therefore believe in themselves so much they have a ton of self-conviction and never struggle with that. And then I think for many of the rest of us, we don't have that. We don't start there. And I certainly didn't start there. I had to build conviction in myself over time. I think there was a thread of like, there's some kind of belief. Like I thought I at least had hope maybe, or something like that. But I think it's taken many years to believe in myself the way I think you do ultimately need to be a founder. But I don't think that happened overnight to me for me. And I also don't, I transparently think it's something I still have to work on. I have to fight for my confidence and reinforce my confidence and reinforce that self-belief every single day. And so I think it's just a very personal journey with where you are at and how much belief you have in yourself and how you build that up over time. And then I think very similar for the company itself. I think you have to start with yourself, because frankly, it doesn't matter how much conviction you have in an idea. If you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be very hard to make that happen. So you have to work on that piece. And I think eventually it kind of ties into this like building conviction in the company that you're working on itself. But I view them as very related but separate concepts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what I really appreciate, I think at least I can relate to you as an immigrant who moved here 10 years ago. I kind of share a similar story with you, which I come from a place where ambition is not even a thing. Dreams are like just like this thing you see on movies. You should never have a dream. Get a degree, go to a steady job, get married, have 2 kids, buy a house, buy a small car. That's it. You're done for life. And that cycle repeats. And it is really hard to build conviction. Forget about conviction. It's really hard to build that you can believe in something and you can achieve that. That is like a mirage, right? Like it's never a thing. But I feel, to your point, what I kind of dub ours, the set of people like us, we are not champions, but we have a championship mindset. It's like there is MJs of the world who are born champions, or LeBrons, like they're champions. They figure out at very young age. They're surrounded by people. They were kind of like groomed in a way that They were trying to brainwash that you are a champion by default.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there are other set of people like Steph Curry, who's an underdog. Like, even though he has some background, his dad is in NBA and all that, he's still underestimated his whole life. He's kind of still fights to confidence. So there are a set of people who
yeah.
has this mindset
Totally.
of, hey, I want to become a champion. I'm not a champion. There is a self-awareness aspect of it, but also like, hey, I want to become that. So I think I want to dub ourselves like, people with championship mindsets. And I think there is no right or wrong, but like you said, right?
Totally.
It's all like,
Yeah,
it's all
everyone has a
personal.
different starting point. Everyone, you have to start where you're at. You can't pretend to be something you're not. Like, I think this is true. It's a good analogy, the one when you use someone like Steph, who was I don't think people expected him. Like LeBron, Kobe, they came into the NBA and they were kind of perceived as they would be like some of the greatest ever, and they went on to be some of the greatest ever. Whereas Steph was much more underestimated coming out of college, and even leading up to college. And I think like similarly though in like entrepreneurship, like you've got people like Bill Gates who grew up incredibly privileged, probably one of the most privileged people in America, both in terms of where he went to school, who his parents were, how wealthy they were. Like he grew up literally. If you go like study his childhood, he had I think it was on a regular basis. He would just be having dinner at his home with like heads of state, powerful executives, entrepreneurs. Like
Right.
he was surrounded by success. And so if you've come from that place, it's very obvious to you that,
Right.
or at least I believe for many people, it's much. You don't have as hard of a time building up the idea that you would be a person like that because you've just been surrounded by it. It almost becomes the expectation. Whereas if you don't come from that, it feels like such a, how could I ever get there? And so I think you just have to know where you're at and then build from there. And I think like I think there's no like one
Yeah.
there's
So
no
one
one
recipe.
way to win, but you've just got to like figure out where you're at and then figure out who you are, what you have in you, and then how to get to the next level. Like for me, working at On Deck Capital, like places I've been at before, I was surrounded by people that I frankly thought were better than me, and in many ways probably were better than me. But I also proved to myself that I could cut it around those people and in those environments. And I think to some extent, if you don't start out with like this default insane amount of like breeding and confidence, you have to somehow build your way up to that. And everyone's journey is going to be different to that. But if you don't have it, don't try to like. I'm not a huge fan of faking it. I'm a bigger fan of proving to yourself and then eventually the world that you do have it. And if you prove it to yourself, there's a good chance you can go prove it to the world. But like you have to prove it to yourself. You're not going to fake that you believe in yourself if you don't actually believe in yourself.
Yeah, I was about to go there. Proving yourself. I want to ask, like, when is that first time? You said you grew up mostly in Midwestern, culture of the US, and even like in early 20s, you don't know tech and startups. What was that first kind of breakthrough you did? Like, is it that EV company you built, or even going back to that?
Yeah.
What was those early days like, where Andrew from who lived till that point 20 years will be different from the rest of his life? What was that transition?
I think there's like a few different inflection points along the way. And so it probably the first really big one that would stand out is when I was like not to get too deep, but I was a very depressed teenager, and like our family really struggled as a teenager. We were like quite poor in that period of time. And I was just generally also like a very unhappy teenager. So I was pretty depressed. I was also fairly overweight actually at like 13, 14. And so when I was 15, I lost like, I think in about a 6-month period, I lost something to the effect of like 60, 70 pounds.
Whoa.
In a very short period of time. And so like started lifting weights, got more fit than I'd ever have been before in my life. And in that part of the Midwest, there's a lot of like, just like obesity and just lack of healthiness. It's quite common, sadly. And so changing that, when like no one else did that for me, no one pushed me to do that, but I made that decision to change myself.
Wow.
And I think the thing I learned there is I view that as an inflection point in my life. It was the first time I learned agency. I had the ability to go change something about myself, change something about my environment, and therefore get a different set of results based on that. And it had nothing to do with anybody else. It was just entirely my own decision and then my own like consistent discipline to do the work. that got me the outcome that I wanted. And so
Mm.
that was like a really big inflection point, and it truly changed how I saw myself and how I saw the world and my ability to impact my life. Because I think up until that point, I felt very out of control. And I think
Mm.
after that, I don't necessarily think I thought I had control, but it's like, okay, I can actually influence what happens to me. So if I could do that with this, maybe I could do that to other things. And so I think then if you fast forward, so from that point, I started working around that same age as well. Like I was working initially like 40 hours, and eventually, like by the time I was really through most of high school, I worked 60 to 80 hours a week or more,
Wow.
and did school full time. I was homeschooled, so I did school in the evenings oftentimes, and so I worked a ton. And the reason I did that is I did that because I wanted to go to college. My parents hadn't gone to college. In my head, I didn't know much about college, but I was like, okay, it seems like the only way to not be poor is I got to go to college of some kind. And so then it's like, okay, and my parents can't pay for this, so I have to do it. And so I was saved a lot of money for someone that young, working like very low paying jobs. I saved a good amount of money doing that. I learned a lot of agency just like through that process. And then I do go to like a very shitty liberal arts school in Florida because I didn't know what I was doing, but I like got to a school and paid my way through school. And so like I think I had like that increasing agency over time there. And then in school, I ended up meeting these entrepreneurs in the Midwest. They were building, it was essentially like a very niche braking system in the recreational vehicle industry. So think like
Right.
literally like a camper is pulling a vehicle behind it. There is a very good chance that it's using their braking system. They like dominated this very niche market. And so
Right.
I was interning for this family business. At this point, I've decided that I'm interested in entrepreneurship, but I didn't really understand it. And so I'm just like kind of pulling on threads. I ended up there, I'm an intern, and they sell the business. It is a very good outcome for the founders of this business. And I had gotten to be close to the founders of that business. And two of them spun out and started a new company after that acquisition. That company was called Olympus. And they were actually going to go manufacture an entire like low speed electric vehicle in the same industry, recreational vehicles, where they had been before. And so I didn't know what I was doing, but they basically brought me on as like their third co-founder. We
Oh.
raised some money, and then that's how I ended up like getting into something like, it was a weird startup because it wasn't really it was still in the Midwest. It wasn't a full blown like venture backed thing. We raised from like local rich individuals basically.
Right.
And in the business, the funny thing about it too is like it wasn't even really successful. Like it was a very hard business. I think we were
Right.
we worked on it for a couple of years, had some success, and did sell it, but it was like we sold it mostly because we knew it wasn't a very good business, and we just didn't want to lose people's money. So it wasn't a success. But being at that business and being surrounded by people that were higher agency and trying to build something from scratch was intoxicating. And it did teach me a lot just about like, okay, the world is somewhat moldable. And it kind of gave me a taste for like, okay, I like this. And also being from a still relatively uncredentialed background, generally I found that startups and people in that scene were more likely to give me a shot than, I don't know, some investment bank on the East Coast. And so I went from there to a venture fund, and I was still in the Midwest. And I think I quickly realized there that the problem was like Midwestern tech is just like people play too small. And I wanted to be in a more ambitious part of tech. I wanted to be either in San Francisco or New York or someplace like that. And so I'd say the next big inflection was like On Deck, really, which is a place that we both worked for.
Yeah.
And On Deck, I joined as an early employee like during COVID. So the world was still locked down. But what I saw at On Deck is this company that was clearly taking off, growing fast. They had like just raised the seed round. They clearly had some kind of like inflection, and they had a lot of talented people at the company and around it. And so my bet with On Deck was if I went there, proved myself, I could essentially like break my way into Silicon Valley, start building the network I needed to ultimately get to like my goal was like I wanted to start my own company. But I knew where I was at in the Midwest and like what I had like where I was at then. Like I didn't really have the network or didn't have the resources and wasn't around the kind of talent that I wanted to be. And so I made that jump, even though On Deck was not as successful as I think many of us like wanted to be. Like for those listening, they went from like 0 to 20 million in revenue. We raised a ton of money, like raised hundreds of millions of dollars, all the stuff, and then it kind of petered out. But being there at that time around really talented people, I was able to build that network. I was able to work around like a lot of really, really talented people and improve myself to those people. And I'd say that was like the last like really big one, is that inflection point. I kind of have the first inflection point where I like start just like seeing my own agency. I have like kind of these like further inflections where I kind of go off that and just like build my way up into realizing, okay, I like tech, I like this entrepreneurial thing. I want to like start my own company. And then on deck is really the moment where I feel like I kind of broke my way into the room of
Mm.
Silicon Valley per se,
Mm-hmm.
but also felt like I belonged there. Because I think prior to on deck, I doubted if I could cut it. It's
Sure.
like, okay, I can like work in Midwestern tech, but could I cut it in San
Valley.
Francisco or New York? And
Yeah.
so I think after that, I no longer doubted that. And so I think like I would kind of count in terms of like both mindset and then opportunity. I think those were the points along the way that were big for me.
I think big takeaway right there is you should build your way up. You should take small bets, do small things, and it compounds over time. I think we both have kind of a similar stories in different ways. I did the same thing. Like you have to build little projects. You build little leverage. You build little specific knowledge. You double down on that, and you get opportunities. You break them. Then kind of like we're still not there yet. I can talk about you as well. You're still hungry. You're still kind of want to prove yourself as a founder. So it's so interesting because there's some kind of overlap between both of us, and I'm so glad you're talking my language is what I'm telling.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's like definitely not made it. It's just like, but like the small wins that you just like keep at it, and things compound if you just stick with things long enough. Eventually, something usually breaks your way.
yeah, and that brings to me to my next topic is about betting on people. And you recently posted about post on Regina again on deck. The folks there took a bet on you, and that kind of one decision really changed everything. Like how Steve Jobs says, you can only look backwards and connect the dots. Now you look backwards, like you found your co-founder there, you met partied on people there, like so many things that happened because of that one decision. So
Totally.
not even more of like a decision, but it's a bet that someone took on someone. So talk to me about again the impact on betting on people, and why should people take more bets on other folks?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to this as much as I've experienced it, or maybe been on the other side of it. But I think that so on deck was definitely like a career changing one for me. It's what broke me, as I said, into Silicon Valley, and I think like and helped me improve my own confidence. But yeah, I'd met many. We have a ton, like I think like dozens of ex on deck people have angel invested in my company now, including all of the founders of on deck, like Julian, David, Eric. They all angel invested, and so like that was just like big. Many people I just like met through it that like weren't like even directly a part of on deck, but just met during my time there, have like been valuable in ways and just helpful and good people to know in ways I could never have expected, either as investors or just like friends of the company. So there's that piece of it for sure. I met Steven there. Steven was head of engineering at On Deck. And so he and I met there, we worked together. And so like there's a good chance like TaxWire and everything we're doing now like doesn't happen with probably at least doesn't happen the same way without On Deck.
Right.
I met Jordy and the Party Round team when they were just starting out, and I later joined as head of growth. And so I think I can really tie a lot of things back there. And so I think definitely like I would not be where I'm at without many people taking bets on me along the way. I think Regina being one person who was the person who ultimately decided to hire me at On Deck, and so I wouldn't be here without her for sure. And so like I think you just have to do the best you can and hope that people will take those bets on you, and then make them like kind of prove them right when they do. But even since then, like our investors that like invested in our company also bet on us. And so I think on the flip side, I think what I've tried to do is do my best to, when you see someone who you believe is like worth taking that bet on in whatever context, do your best to pay it forward. I think it like for example, like I hired someone on my team at On Deck at one point as an intern who I think had like less of an obvious resume than some. Like she was pretty young. She was like 19. Her name is Vivian Meng. I think quite highly of her. And so like she would have been successful like with or without me. But she shot me like this very impressive cold email when I was hiring for an intern for my team at On Deck. And she was just like, is it less experienced, but she clearly could do good work. It was just like obvious and like how she wrote this email and all this other stuff. And so we took the bet on hiring her, and then she went on to like just be exceptionally successful at On Deck, and then like later other places she's gone in her career. And so it's just like some you never know. And so I think it's like you're always looking. I think it's good to always look out for people, and if nothing else, even just like I try to occasionally when I can, when someone, a student or just another founder, whatever, someone like trying to break into startups, like if I think I can maybe help them and they just seem like they want it and they're hungry and they're hustling, I do my best to be helpful to people where I can be. And then sometimes hopefully like it's the nice thing too about like starting your own company is that you also start getting the chance to like hire people. Like we're recruiting for an open role right now, and like I think it's like one of those things you go through. You're looking at like some people have more like established resumes, and some people are more a little bit more junior or like less proven. And so I think it's lucrative just in terms of like purely like if you can find someone early and take that bet, it is good for you because you found this like person who is not valued as much as the rest of the market, and that's valuable in building a company. But generally too, it's just like super fulfilling to see someone go succeed. And it's like not just because of you, but it's like being able to just be a small part of their journey is like super rewarding. And I view it as like I wouldn't be here without that. And so I think it's like one of the best things about Silicon Valley is there are a lot of people that try to pay it forward and try to help the next generation.
Yeah, totally. I think the valley is made by people who pay it forward, like period, right? Like everybody's kind of connected. That's why it's still so impactful there. Like when you go to SF, you see like these people trying to help you. Not everybody's going to come forward, but I think that's why you have to like surround yourselves with people who take bets.
I'm sure people have like, I would imagine people have helped you and taken bets on you over the course of your career as well.
Absolutely, 100%. I think, man, where should I start? I think this is for another discussion, but so many folks, they just responded, like I said, I used to be on the other side where I used to cold DM. And one fun story, I cold DM Naval Ravikant when I was building this simple, stupid side project about him, and he responded. He's added few comments. We ended up kind of working virtually and, shipping that simple project. So again, going back to those, I feel my biggest takeaway where for people who are on the other side, not people who are taking bets, is you have to put yourself out and do things, multiple shots, take multiple shots, present yourself. And then people kind of recognize that, like, in a sense, oh, he or she has like proof of work. He or she has like, social network, and he or she like has this insight. Let me kind of like take a bet, right? I think there are some set of people, again, the other side, but you have to pick and choose who you want to surround yourself with, or at least on Twitter, for example.
Totally.
It's all about like, how you present yourself and how positive you want to be, talk about your dreams transparently, and it's kind of like a thing. I don't know how to am I explaining it right or wrong, but absolutely, I would have not been here without people like Ryan who took a bet on me and hired me at Product Hunt. Naval Ravikant, for that little cold email, I'm still like, I have the juice of, whoa, Naval replied, and I do have access to his DMs. That means, oh, whoa, there is a channel, right? So there is a jolt of things that come from taking shots and from people like them taking bets. But yeah, it's a serendipitous thing, and when you are on Twitter, you do these things and people react, and that's how I feel like you've kind of explained how you build TaxWire as well. I want to talk about the transition. You were at On Deck, you were at Party Round. You took those lead growth roles. So one question before we go dive into like TaxWire, talk to me about the, as a founder, you have to do everything in the beginning, in the early stage, right? When it comes to growth, when a founder, he or she should especially target about growth, there are like multiple things. You have to talk to customers, you have to build product, distribution, so many things. When is the right time to focus fully on growth, in your opinion? Because you saw the highs, the hyper growth phase at On Deck in so many things. So I'm curious to know your thoughts.
I mean, I don't think I'm an expert. I think that I think it's a trite thing to say because everyone knows this in startups, but product market
Mm-hmm.
fit is kind of the thing that matters like the most at the end of the day. And so like
Right.
no amount of like growth skills are gonna fix a lack of product market fit. But I do think you do always have to be thinking about distribution. Even when you're trying to get to product market fit, you need to be able to get enough like in front of enough customers, get enough shots on goal, get people excited about enough about like what you're trying to do or about even just you to be able to
Right.
have that chance. And so I think that it is something you always have to think about. I think there's a danger in thinking about it too much. Like I think in the case of On Deck, I think On Deck was a complicated business that was a product of its time, and not. I think because On Deck was actually a sum of like 20 or 30 other different like individual communities and business lines and products, and like there was an investing fund. We had a lot going on, and
Yeah,
I think in
there were
some
special
ways
projects which
yeah
I got hired.
we had so much going on, and so I think like part of the issue there is that like different parts of the business had more product market fit than the other parts of the business. And I think On Deck, as we scaled, we had so much hype and we're so good at like growth and marketing, etc., that we could
Right.
kind of make anything look like it had product market fit for 3 to 6 months. Doesn't necessarily mean it had like actual product market fit. And so I think even though pieces of On Deck had product market fit, the collective thing never had as much product market fit as it like sometimes could look like it had. And I think that was always an issue for us. Um, and so, and like even just like being at the company while the numbers were all going up, it still felt like, okay, like some of these things like just never fully felt sustainable. And I think we were always wrestling with that and never found an answer
Mm-hmm.
to that at On Deck. I think at Capital, so originally Capital was called Party Round. We kind of
Yep.
came out of the gate with like being a very marketing first company. Like most people, many people to this day still know the company more for the marketing and the memes, and all the stuff we did from like
On the
that to New York
drops.
Tech Week, the
Yeah.
drops. Yeah. And so I think the good side of that is that we had a ton of attention and we punched way above our weight in distribution for how early we were as a company. The downside of that is we never really converted that into like a real like product business with like product market fit. I think we had the opportunity to do that. Like the actual product roadmap that we ultimately landed on is now like working actually for other companies in that space, but we just didn't execute on it fully. So I think like just understanding that growth and marketing and attention is only one piece of the game, and it's not going to inherently make you successful. And a lot of times it can make you ignore the real systemic issues in your business. Like it was obvious that like that alone was not going to make us successful at Party Round / Capital, even to some degree at On Deck. And so I think like
Right.
it does. I think it can be dangerous to focus on it like too much early on. So I think in terms of like the lessons I at least took from that and go into doing what I'm doing now is that it does matter a lot. I think for a more or less first time founder that I think I probably think about distribution an above average amount. But I also don't think it's everything because I've seen I actually think like Party Round and Capital specifically is an example of a company that almost did the reverse. Like we had a marketing plan before we fully knew what our product roadmap was, and
Right.
I think that like that's almost like maybe the example where that goes too far in the other direction. And so I think for this business, I think early on I just like I didn't really think about marketing a ton. I think even as I was formulating like okay like, as I was like validating the problem and like talking to customers and like doing the things that generally I'd imagine anyone that's like trying to build a B2B software company of some kind is doing. I was always trying to like I think naturally I have like trained my brain to think about like okay like if in the back of your mind you're always calibrating like you're starting small, you're starting with these customers, you're starting with like maybe even like this one customer, but you're thinking about like okay like how many more like if you're say you're building something for one customer, but you're kind of thinking about like okay could I get in front of like 10 more people like this? Are there other people like this company? How would I get in front of them? Like where are they at? Like where as you're like talking to them about like the product you're thinking of building or are building or like the pain that they have, you can also like find signals in those conversations for like for example, if they bought another product in a similar space, or if you're looking at replacing a current product they use, you can learn about like where did they discover that product, like who do they ask when they're like looking to buy other products, like where do they spend time on the internet, like who like you can like learn these things by talking to people, and this is not marketing per se, but you're like as you learn about the product you're trying to build and the pain and the problems that your customer has, you're also learning how to message, how to distribute to them. Like you're always like kind of it's I don't really view them as like separate pieces of the process.
Yeah.
I view it as like it's all kind of part of the same thing at the end of the day.
Right.
And so I think like I don't necessarily think you have to be doing tons of like growth and marketing and whatever right away. But I do think you always want to be thinking of like, okay, how would I go do distribution for this company, this
Right.
problem space, whatever.
I think once you take care of your product and talking to customers, everything you do is kind of like a byproduct, right? On the side, it kind of snowballs itself. A little bit of you sharing your stories comes under marketing, building in public. There might be a growth idea when you launch. So it's all like kind of I do see where you're going with that answer. One curious follow up there before we talk about TaxWire. You've done many things at these two companies, in growth roles. Do you see a pattern of unconventional growth that you learn to, or at least planning to adapt to use at TaxWire from your previous growth experiences?
It's a good question. I think like I try to just think from. I think I get from marketing. I think I get inspiration from a lot of things. Definitely some of the things that I learned at those places. I think it's dangerous to try to over replicate any one thing that like worked at a different company, because also too like the market things are always changing. Every business is different, so I think
Right.
it's important to think from first principles and to draw inspiration even
Yeah.
outside of like what it is you're currently doing or have done before. But I think if anything did, if a couple of things have that I learned from those experiences that I am taking to now, is that brand specifically, be it your personal brand or your company brand, or ideally they're kind of different sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
is an unfair advantage if you have it. I think a lot of companies in B2B specifically don't take brand very seriously.
Yep.
But like there's a good saying by an older marketing person who it might even be dead now. I forget the name of the person, but it's essentially that if you have like brands get to play, if you have a brand, you get to play the game of capitalism on easy mode. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because it's like at Capital, I would go into partnership conversations with like bigger fintech companies that we were trying to do some kind of BD deal with, and they just like we would get on the phone. Like this happened with Stripe at one point. We got on the phone with Stripe, and like we're this like tiny startup, seed stage startup, but Stripe it like was like
huge.
really like the people there were really into like some of the marketing that we done. And so it's like we punched like the awareness that people had of us, and the like the way they resonated with who we were or who we purported ourselves to be was like punched far above like where we were at as the company. And there were like much bigger businesses that did not have that going on for them. And so when you have that going for you, both about your personal brand or the company brand, or just generally people feeling like they have something of a relationship or an awareness of you, and generally like feeling positive towards you, that is a huge unfair advantage. And so I think relating that into what I'm doing now, I just like seeing that for just both like being myself on the internet and then generally like being involved in marketing for companies, that when you pull that off and have that more like one-to-many relationship at scale, it is a complete unfair advantage. And so I think that's probably something that I think about maybe more than some founders do, just because I've been on the other side of seeing how effective it can be.
Yeah, personal brands. I think it's an important thing in 2024. If you're a founder, you don't have a personal brand. It's kind of really hard to do business, whether you're building B2B, B2C, and there are like different factors. I'm not saying it's an absolute way to do it, but at least having a personal brand, talking about your lifestyle, just like how you talked about rotisserie chicken, right? It's a thing. It's like being transparent on the internet is it's going to help you build a company, in a different way. 10, 20 years ago, that's not a thing at all. Like, who gives a fuck about what your opinions are? Right now, everybody's like, whoa, what is your diet? What is your gym schedule? What is your productivity stack? How do you think about, solving a problem? This is not at all entirely, what are your habits? Like, what books do you recommend? People are getting more into other people's lives in a positive way. Again, not in a stalking way, but I think you're absolutely true. I feel I can resonate with that. Having a personal brand is an indirect way of growing your own company. Yeah, I think that kind of brings me to the point of TaxWire. You left capital party round. You did fractional work. You accidentally found this problem. So what happened there? And I
Yeah.
read your blog. We will
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
point to people like you've kind of wanted to do like bunch of things, not just this one. And I the more specific question I have is, how did you find this is the right one, and you picked on this one? The decision behind okay, I have to fix B2B's tax compliance
Yeah.
versus the
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do. I think most. I think there's like two different types of founders. There's people that are they like are born obsessed with like they're I don't know, they've like if you've always been into coffees to like an extreme level that you were like always like I'm going to start some kind of business around coffee, or it's at some point
Sure.
maybe you just like fall in love with like a very specific domain or problem or
Yeah.
product or whatever, and like I'm going to go do this thing. I think for many of us, it's like we could do a lot of things, and it's more of like we enjoying the game and the craft of building something and building a company. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a specific thing. And so I think I more fall into that bucket, where I could do a lot of things and be happy. And so I think, but I do think you do have to have a sufficient level of aptitude for what it is you're working on. But to me, things that matter more is like, do I find the domain sufficiently interesting? And for me, like I am the kind of nerd that would read about payments on the weekend because I think it's like how the core fundamentals of how our economy works and just how things, products, whatever in the world works is really interesting. And then two, I care a lot about who my customer is, and I think it's really important to like if you're gonna try to build a product and a business, you exist to serve a customer, and if you don't do that well, you will eventually cease to exist. And I think a lot about can I be obsessed with and just love this
Mm.
customer, love spending time with them, love serving them, love trying to like get inside their brains and understand how they think and like what like problems they have and so forth. And so I think those things mattered to me a lot. And then I guess if there was like a third thing, I think winning matters. And so if you
Mm.
found something you're sufficiently interested in, if you found, I guess, a customer you love serving, I think the third thing is just like you need to win. And so like
Mm.
it doesn't matter how passionate you are about something. If you're passionate about a topic and you're trying to build a company around it, and you're losing. It does not feel good. If
Matter.
you have no
Yeah.
momentum, it does not feel good. And so you're not going to be fulfilled doing that. And so I think momentum and winning matters a lot more than people give it credit for. And so I think when people start
Yeah.
companies, they get really caught up in the idea, but working on an idea that you're really into that's not working is gonna like you're gonna be miserable. And so what I trended towards is I was pretty clear after I left Capital that I wanted to start a company. I wasn't sure what though. I had really not been
Yeah.
thinking about starting a company up until I left, and so I kind of spent a few months trying a few different things and like talking to a lot of customers and trying to figure out like what felt right for me. And I was actually working on something different, but with TaxWire, I had taken a fractional head of finance and an ops role at a friend's company that I invested in, and I ended up like dealing with sales tax compliance across multiple different states. So that company was a school lunch marketplace. Think like if
Yeah.
you if you're a K through 12 school or you have a parent that's in or a child that's in a K through 12 school, like this basically replaces the school lunch cafeteria meal program, and you just order or your child orders like food
Oh, interesting.
that day, and it is delivered through this marketplace. And so this company is doing extremely well. It's like the fastest growing school lunch program in America.
Wow.
But the reality is, if you're running a business that like supplies food to kids for lunch across America, you have to comply with U.S. sales and use tax laws in all of those different states. And so it's not like the IRS. Like each state has their own rules for like what's taxable, what the rate is, and it literally goes from like the city to like the county, the city, the municipality, like state. They all have like different laws, and so it gets really complicated if you're like the person running this business trying to figure out like what the hell, how the hell am I supposed to collect taxes on all of these transactions across all of these different places in in like 15 different states. I have to like
Yeah.
register there. Like how do we accurately collect the taxes? And then I have to like file returns in these different places. And so it gets really complicated. And so that I was trying to solve that problem, and I bought the current leading product in that market to try to solve this problem while I was at that company, and just I kind of like fell into it, but then got very interested in the problem because it was like one of those things where it was like very obvious that, okay, I feel this problem, this company I'm at feels this problem. I'm talking to a few other friends and they've had similar issues with the same problem. And so it just kind of happened. Like I was in a head state where I wanted to start a company, and I think I found this at the right point in time. And it kind of it just like made sense. It was like one of those things. It was like extremely obvious that, okay, a lot of companies are operating businesses where you sell software, e-commerce products, like whatever, all across the country, all across the world even. And so you are going to have to deal with taxes at some point in these different jurisdictions. And nobody has time to be an expert on those things. So it was very obvious that a very easy modern product needed to exist to automate and streamline all of that. And none of the products I looked at using like did what I needed them to do. And so it was like right combination of like looking to start a company at that point in time, but also having very viscerally felt that this problem that I was dealing with.
It reminds me from your answer about a couple of things. One is founders who take educated guess and they build startups because, you know, they have like an insight, like you said, on the domain, a particular domain or an industry or like even like a problem, and they succeed because they're taking a shot with that educated guess. And there is this other set of founders who solve their own problem. And I kind of love the transition. You went from, hey, I love reading about payments. That's in a more of like, hey, maybe I want to build something here too. Okay, I'm working at this thing. I found a problem. Let's go dive into deeper levels and then fix it. It's so kind of like interesting. I just want to point that. And the other thing, you know, I feel one of the, in other words, Andrew Gestecki from Acquire, I interviewed him and I asked him, how did you find or decided to go on Acquire, like full on? And he said, one of the questions he asked himself or suggests founders is that, ask yourself, will you spend the next 10 years solving this problem? If you have that answer is yes, and if you have that conviction, just go build it. It'll work it out. So I think in your to your answer as well, it's kind of the same way, right? You want to be here because it's that passion blending into conviction. This one put there.
Actually, like, and quick, I just realized I am back to back, so just quick heads up, I'll probably have to jump in like a couple minutes. But I can go over enough to like make sure we like find a good stopping point. But I actually have a different take though than Andrew did on the from just like, should you like the 10-year question? I got asked that a lot. I actually think I've written a post about this. I don't think that like for most entrepreneurs, asking yourself, should I work on this for the next 10 years of my life, is that helpful, especially if your career is not even been like gone for 10 years. Like I'm 27. I was like not doing startups. I was not like having this career 10 years ago. So like my career is shorter than 10 years. How the hell do I know if I'm going to want to work on this for 10 years? I think for most people that gets you into asking yourself all of these existential questions that are very hard to answer. And so I actually think the better thing to ask yourself is like, just, can I win at this? It's like, if you are the type of person that just loves, again, backs to like, I love this customer, I find this interesting, and I like generally love the craft of obsessing over a customer and like building products to solve their problem and building a team. Like I love this stuff. Then I think what matters more is like, will this work or not? And so I think like asking that 10-year question is like completely useless. What I did instead is like, once I had sufficient conviction that like, okay, I think I'm really into this, I think this might work, I put a date in the calendar and like I think like 60 days ahead, and just didn't look up for those 60 days. Like I didn't think about working on something else. I didn't think about any other ideas. I just heads down worked on this. But before those 60 days were up, like it was just like very obvious that this is like what there was something to this. I thought it was going to work, at least to some extent. And so I was just like all in. And so I think for a lot of people, actually, that 10-year question is the wrong question to ask. I think the better question is like, as long as it's met like a minimum threshold of like, I like this, the better question to ask is like, will this, like, will it work or not? Because if it doesn't matter if you work on it for 10 years, if it's not, if it's going to fail, that's kind of like a pointless question.
I think that's very interesting. I think first time founders should ask, will this work or not? Second time founders or successful founders who've done things before, they should ask like, hey, should I spend the next 10 years on this problem or not? That's a very interesting, take. I would definitely I see what the truth behind that question. I know we're on time, so let me ask you a couple of things. One, I'm very curious. Once you have a problem, the 60 days is done, you decided, why didn't you go after applying for accelerators or like YC or any other things? Like, there are like a million accelerators out there, Techstars and as such, versus like going after like, hey, let me tap on my network and, raise money. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think there are two quick reasons to that. I think that the generally one, like I'm for the most part, like I think accelerators really make you, unless like you already are working on a thing and you have a ton of conviction, it's just that you end up playing a lot of games to get into the accelerator and then to like try to get enough traction for demo day. And like I think some of the accelerators just like lean into like playing the game of building a startup versus like focusing on what really matters for your specific business. And so I think I just like was a little bit skeptical of some of that. And then I think like I was confident enough in my network that I thought I could raise money without having to be in an accelerator when the time came. And so I think that those were the two main reasons. And then I do think like one downside of places like YC, which I have a lot of respect for, is that it does like really, really push you into this box where everyone's all kind of trying to do the same things. And while that's good in some ways, I think it can lead to like just like doing like thinking the same way everyone else is thinking, which is not always like the best thing for your specific business. So I think I prized the freedom of trying to like keep things very first principles versus like doing whatever I felt like I needed to do once I got into an accelerator.
I think last thing, it almost feels you wrote about this as well, like looking at boring problems. Curious to know your thoughts on why should founders pay attention to boring problems. Even the startup you said before, it's so kind of, it goes over your head, like ordering food for your kid. That's not usual, right? It's so unusual. Even like the problem you're solving, it's so unusual. The problem exists, but it's so unusual to put a ribbon on it. So yeah, talk to me about like how a founder should approach looking at boring problems.
Yeah, I think I think it just depends on like who you are, and different people can get excited by different things. Again, like I think it's mostly, are you focused on doing something that's a passion project that maybe you can make be a great business, or are you focused on like, are you the kind of person that can be interested in a lot of things and generally just like wants to work on something that's going to win? And I think a lot of like very sexy ideas also have a lot of competition and are generally a lot harder to make work too. And also a lot of like what we decide is sexy is entirely based on what the people around us think is like cool, interesting, and sexy. So if all you do is hang out with like fintech payment nerds, you're probably actually going to have a social circle that thinks doing a payments business is really interesting, versus if you're hanging around a ton of like cool kids in Brooklyn who are like into the next thing in culture, they're probably not going to be into your fintech startup. And so it's like, I think these things are all like very mimetic to begin with. And so I think it just keep it first principled on like, what do you care about? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do something that's cool, or do you want to do something that works, solves a problem, and is going to be a real business? And if you want to do that, like there's a lot of like unsexy problems in the world that need to be solved. And so I think if you're okay with like doing something like that, then I think it becomes less about like, is this sexy or not?
That's very interesting. And I know we are out of time, so Andrew, appreciate you joining, and I can't wait for TaxWire to get launched. I kind of got a sense that it's in stealth, and more
to come.
More to come, and hopefully maybe around this episode goes live, we can like plug that. But any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really, man. I appreciate you having me. Thanks for doing this and putting out so many good vibes into the universe, and excited about all the things you're up to as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. And that's it, folks. Andrew, I think we should do another one sometime, because there is so much to unpack. The post, launch of TaxWire and like the lessons from there. But yeah, folks, we have awesome founders joining the show, sharing their stories, the highs, lows, everything else in between. So stay tuned. And cheers from this end.